Here we go. Awesome. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this fine world. We appreciate you showing up for us on this meeting with us. And where we're going to be talking about a very deep subject. And to be honest, even for me this morning, I'm kind of avoided it, but I know it's one of those conversations that we need to have. Today, we're going to be talking about moving from shame to compassion.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you so much for showing up and giving us a little bit of your time today on a Saturday. We'd love to know where you are in the world and let us know where you're coming from. We'll get going in just a second. We just want to give everyone a moment. And you'll find that while we may look like talking heads, we're actually not. We are attached to other things, and we would love your participation as well. So please feel free to join us and feel free to comment as well, especially if you're catching this on YouTube afterwards. We'd love to engage with you and know what you think. And, you know, you'll find that the topics that Michael and I cover, we go there. We go where few are willing to go. And we'd love to have you here with us. That just shows what a brave, beautiful badass you are. So thank you for joining us. My name is Suzanne Buchanan, and I am one half of Elevation Mindset. My partner, Michael Dancliffe, and I started this little show. Goodness, Michael, how long has it been now?
Yeah, we started in January of, well, actually, we originally were doing this conversation in October of 2019, if I remember right.
Yes.
And it's evolved over time. And
that's right.
So much deeper.
We beat the COVID curve. We were actually part of the COVID curve. And one of the reasons why we started having these conversations was that we were looking around when the whole world seemed to be turned upside down and felt that no one was showing up for others and no one was having important conversations and kind of pushing the needle on the personal growth scale for people. So we started showing up once a month. We kept showing up once a month, and we have really crafted a year of conversations that are an arc to get us to our personal growth and development goals. So we'd love to have you here. And, you know, as I was saying a few seconds ago, thank you for showing up on one of the topics that you won't find many other people talking about, because it hits that uncomfortable place. It hits one of those many places and many hot spots that make us uncomfortable. And in our journey, Michael and I have both learned that those hot spots, those uncomfortable places, are usually exactly where you need to grow. That instead of hiding them, instead of pretending they don't exist, that in doing so, we often give them power, and we often neglect to acknowledge if somehow that hotspot is blocking our growth and opportunity. So thank you for being here. Courageous conversations are where it's at. As I mentioned, my name is Suzanne Buchanan. I am a career communications specialist. I am also a dialogue facilitator. I'm an ADR professional, and I love to be at the heart of conversations that matter. And that tends to be where you'll find me, is where conversations are the hottest. I love to jump in and breathe truth and breathe peace. Michael, my partner, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Michael Danclough. I have a coaching business called Elevate Your Best, and I come from this place of, the way I like to describe it is both a combination of sacred listening and ruthless compassion. This ability to listen to what's not being said, giving space for people to say what they need to say, but at the same time being willing to be that person from a place of compassion to challenge people. Are they living and taking the choices that are going to lead them to their best life? And it's, I think, because I've had people who've been willing to do that for me, that I want to then pass that along for others to be able to have the same benefit as someone who's going to hold the space for them and not let them sabotage themselves.
Mhm.
And those are the kind of the deep places that I like to go with people. And sometimes it is dragging out those things that we do feel shame for, and sometimes it's those things that we don't feel like we are qualified for, the imposter syndrome or this skeleton in the closet piece. That's where I like to play.
And don't worry, we're not like talking about wallowing around in it, guys. We're not into that either, but we need to, like Michael always says, he loves to shine light in dark corners. And I happen to think that there is no dark corner. There's nothing dark about us. And it's often when I look in people's darkness that I see the most light. So as a conflict resolution practitioner, I am used to going into difficult places, into hurt communities, into tumultuous spaces, and helping people find their truth, find their higher self, and work through it. So that's the spirit that brings Michael and I here today. We're both servants that believe in you. We're both servants that we've been there and we've had others show up for us. So we want to show up for you. So as we talk today, you might ask yourself, why are we, February, the end of February, why are we talking about shame? Well, we looked at the month of love and we thought, what is the most powerful obstacle that blocks our way? And I could think of no more powerful obstacle that blocks us from love, self-love, love of others, love of our life, love of our potential than shame. And, Michael, when we were talking about how to define shame, what came to you?
Well, there's a couple of things that came up for me, and it happens to be in relation to other things. Is, at least for me, shame tends to be in a identity thing. It's an internal thing. It's like the value of yourself as a whole tends to be how shame shows up for me. And which is a little bit different in comparison to something like regret, which to me, regret tends to be about a choice that was made or not made, rather than about who I am. So that at least is kind of where I play with this, where I actually experience that aspect of shame.
Yes. Michael and I talked a lot about, okay, so where does the shame guilt matrix, what's the difference between these two? And what we walked away with, and we've seen it since confirmed in several other publications, was that while guilt seems to be attributed to actions, and regret as well, things you did or didn't do, said or didn't say, shame goes to the core of our identity. Shame kind of, internalizes as a root emotion. It's something primal. It's something that we almost holistically apply, that we are bad, that we are less than, and it goes to the core of our identity. Michael, would you agree that was kind of what we came to?
Yeah, I would definitely go into that space. Is feeling guilty for something is certainly something that to me in some ways is more passing, where shame seems to linger. It seems to be something that goes back. We can hold on to that for much longer. That there's some attachment we have, good, bad, or indifferent around shame for us.
Mm.
So I think that there's this, like, we'd actually pulled a quote from Brene Brown that guilt is adaptive and helpful. And it's holding something you did or failed at that you're up against, and there's values in the feeling of psychological discomfort, versus shame is an intense painful feeling or experience, and believing that you're flawed, that like you are flawed, not that choice was flawed, and that you in some reason or in some way that you are unworthy, that you are less than. And that kind of hit home for me, is that that rings pretty true for me.
This isn't something that people walk around and say, oh, I have shame. It's not something. And because it is so deep, we hide it. We hide this. And so if you're someone who thinks, I don't really know that I have shame, what would be, Michael and I talked about, what would the symptoms be? What would you look for to be able to assess if it's not this big, overt, heavy thing? What are the signs that you might have shame? And we came up with a little bit of a list. And you know what I said in the beginning? This is about that hot spot, that place that you don't want to talk about. Maybe it's the time you shut down. Maybe it's the topic that you totally avoid. Or your conversations never run deep there because you're afraid to really get into it. If you've listened to Michael and I for long, I talk about things that make you squirm. Like you just feel uncomfortable and you fidget and you want to hide from. Those might be the areas where you might have something else going on that's a little bit deeper. So we can't help but wonder, what is it? What is it where all of us have something? And I think all of us feel like we have some dark place. I think all of us feel like we have some unlovable space. All of us feel like we have a monster we have to hide. Or maybe we are the monster that we have to hide. And as we get into this, we want to make sure that we are asking the right questions. And sometimes it's not easy to recognize things until we're in the midst of it. But the signs are always there. Michael, can you think of a time where you had signs that you didn't recognize?
Absolutely. I would think that there's been a couple of times, but certainly one peak time where that very much was the case. And for me, I was ignoring all of the warning signs for myself. That for me, if there's an action I'm taking, I feel that physically when it's incongruent with who I believe I am. And the I've started listening a lot more to that, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, for sure. But for me, there was a time whenever that system, it's almost like it started feeling like noise. I was actually in a space where it was more about, I would I would actually call it an addiction for me. And in that addiction space for me, the way it showed up was something where I stopped I stopped looking at all the warning bells. I stopped watching all those signs about, well, this is not who you are. This is not who you say you want to be. This is, why is this even an option? And for me, it was very much about, who is the next person I'm going to connect to? Who's the next person I'm going to relate to? And there definitely was this hole I was looking to fill. And in that moment, it got to one of those situations where the term "at any cost" became part of the vocabulary, maybe not consciously, but certainly unconsciously. And when that is put onto anything, in my opinion, at any cost, is a huge warning sign for me of, this is going to go to a space where I'm going to feel guilty, regretful, and potentially to the degree of shame for what actually transpired. And in my case, that very much came true, is that I didn't listen to those warning signs, was actually on my way to do something that was very much against my character. And that moment has actually defined the last 16 or 17 years of my life in one way, shape, or form. So it was a crucible that I decided to put myself through, for whatever reason. And it was a defining moment. And I've had to learn how to listen internally more, so that did not become, that stain, if you will, wasn't the only characteristic that is who I am and how I show up as.
Guys, as I said, we're not going to stay in shame. And what we just tripped upon here, and we kind of walked you into a little bit, was prevention, right? And prevention comes from listening to the warning signs. Prevention comes from that heightened self-awareness of your actions and your thoughts as well. Am I in alignment with who I'm meant to be? Am I in alignment with my highest energy? And is this action, is this thought serving me? And so many of us we live in a world that is telling you to ignore the signs. We live in a world that's telling you it's okay to ignore your body until it breaks down, until you have to live on pharmaceutical products for the rest of your life. We live in a world that you are being told it's okay to ignore the signs, right? And we have been born into a universe that is full of energy, that is sending signals all the time. We know energy comes from every living and some inanimate things. Energy is all around us. Signals literally are bouncing around us. Which ones do we receive? Which ones are we tuning into? And when Michael was talking about this, what he really was talking about is that slippery slope, that gradual but consistent wearing down and ignoring those signals until we look around and we wonder, how did we get here? Until he looked around and thought, this isn't who I am. I cannot think of a more harmful violation of ourselves, ways that we hurt ourselves when we realize we have made a series of actions that lead us to betraying who we are. What Michael really was talking about was a betrayal of his identity. This is not who I am. Yet his actions alone brought him to where he was. So we're not staying in the position of shame. We want you to look at the path that leads there, because we don't ever want this to happen to you. We all have messed up. We all have areas. We all have those hot spots. But we all also had warning signs, ample warning signs, abundant warning signs. So in the next few months, when you stay with us, you'll see we are talking about, really supercharging that emotional resonance, that GPS system we have that gives us those warning signs, so that we are tuning and honing into our highest frequency. We're going to talk next about how guilt can be actually a useful thing as well. So there's so many conversations we can't wait to have. But for you, Michael, when you realized you were violating everything that you are, was there time to turn it around, or was it too late? I mean, I know you're here, but at that moment, it was before you had repercussions.
So I certainly would say that there was opportunities to turn around before I got there, for sure. And it's one of the things that I think that the masculine side of things can be both a gift and a curse, is this idea of tunnel vision. This is the goal, and everything else falls away. And good or bad, it is one of those things that comes up, and I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't listening. I stopped listening. And since then, I certainly picked up on the warning signs, and hindsight is 2020 for sure. Is like, okay, this is what led up to that. And for me, I had to unpack that. It was something necessary. Is okay, so what led to that, and how do I ensure it doesn't happen in the future? So that very much was a part of the process of getting there. Is, well, now let's figure out what were the triggers for me. What were the things that I'm falling back on? What are the circumstances or the thoughts or the feelings or the environment that is actually going to lead to that, and ensure that is something that is counteracted with, that I surround myself with different people now. There's certain areas that I'm not willing to tread, because it's not an area that's actually going to be helpful for me or anybody around me. So I think that being aware, listening and learning, because I also don't think that those warning signs that we're talking about are universal. I think that each person has their own style of doing that. I think it's through your experience and through your lens, through your culture, that you need to be aware of what those things mean to you. And I think that's been it is part of that human experience, is figure out what the bells and the lights and the dials do on the dashboard of your life. And sometimes the only way you figure out how to do that is by crashing the vehicle. And that definitely was the case for me. And now it's how do we, because I don't want to steal someone's struggles either. I think that it's necessary for us to learn through our own experiences, but I also at the same time think that there's this opportunity with a number of people on this planet who've had similar experiences. Well, let's learn by someone else's mistakes so we can make our own. So
that's their whole field of personal, the coaching, right? That's what coaches do.
Yes.
Coaches help guide you through. But Michael, I have to say, of course, I didn't know you before but I know quite a bit about you since. And I don't know that you'd be this person today
Mhm.
without absolutely devastating your reality.
Right.
And for those of you who are unaware, Michael's actions, created repercussions that follow him to this day.
And living through that and learning the lesson by it and having decisions made for you because of past actions. I think that everyone has had at least some experience for that. I would say that in my case, it's rather extreme. And at the same time, I can't blame anyone else except for me. And I think that that's kind of where we're going to be going a little bit with this as well, is that some of this is about owning what you're doing, owning what you're going to be doing, actually defining this is what's okay for me. This is actually where I'm going to thrive. And it's a matter of that to me was what allowed me to, one, stop digging the hole that I was in, because it certainly, one bad action can certainly lead to more bad choices after that. So you got to stop digging. You've got to, and then you can start climbing out. But it started with owning that. And in my personal experience, that started from the get-go. Well, I wouldn't say at the get-go. It actually took me a while to really truly live into that. And it's like,
Yeah. And let's talk about that moment, if I may.
mhm.
Um, what did you lose? What was wiped out when you came to the realization that you fucked up your life?
Mm. So with that event and what happened after, it restricted for me where I can work, who I can work with. It's also restricted how I was able to show up for my daughter, which I think that was probably the toughest for me.
Mm.
Um, it
What do you
also,
mean? Give an example.
so as an example for me is one of the things that I'm very supportive of my daughter, almost to a to a flawed level, but at the same time is like I wasn't able to go to a daddy-daughter dance with my daughter in middle school, and I've been told by many people I'm a great father, and yet that's an area where I wasn't able to show up for her.
Mm.
And so of course then for me I feel like I've got to overcompensate for that by doing everything else around what I am capable of doing.
Mm.
And it's to the point now where I have heard from her how much she respects who I am
Mm.
because of how I've shown up, but there's still those little pieces where that would be in that space of regret for sure. But
Mm.
why? It's because of this catastrophic event that happened. I currently work for a very small company where they're aware of my circumstances and are okay with that, but I can't actually work in several different industries because of that history. So, and sometimes that can feel like I'm trapped, just so in doing that, it's what I feel. It's not a reality for sure, but it can certainly feel that way. But it is then, if that wasn't the case, I probably wouldn't have considered starting my own business. So there certainly are benefits on the other side, but in the mix of it, it's I could get into this place of blaming everybody around me, but this is all because it's the consequences for my choices. So
Yeah,
other
guys.
things that have really kind of impacted is the relationships that I'm in. Like
Mm.
the who I'm married to right now, I felt like I had to go deep with my stuff early on, like within the first week of actually really connecting with that person. And it's one of those things where it's not like something I want to advertise, but it is something that they need to be aware of, because this can have an impact on them too.
Yes. And as you did with me when we met and we started immediately, Michael and I we're deep thinkers, deep, and our connection, we knew that we wanted to show up for all of you. And he said, look, I have to talk to you. There's something you need to know. And then he introduced this little black cloud that was over his shoulder. And I just told him, I see sun. And that was it. Didn't matter to me because I see who he is now. And I know everyone who gets to know you does. So I just want to give you my respect for your courage and your tenacity and your persistence for climbing out and really giving the middle finger to shame. Because when you own your actions, when you own those dark spaces, they no longer have power over you. And that's this journey that you're sharing with us today. It's that path of ownership, that path of being willing to go in to all of those dark places and figure out what the blankety blank did I do? Why did I do it? And how can we ensure not only that it never happens again, but we can share what you've learned with others so that they'll never go there. And in your coaching journey, I know you help people reach for those and see those higher vibration behaviors and decisions that are going to help them become what they were meant to be.
Well, with that, I kind of want to touch on this other point that I know that we had talked about is they can certainly attempt to do that, but this is something that we allow to happen. It's
That's where I was going.
That we, it can be used as a tool to control you. And I like the fact that you kind of talked about that, is that how do you get out in front of this? Well, this is who I am. This is actually part of what I am. It's not a secret. But at the same time, it's not necessarily something that I don't plan on wearing a scarlet letter anytime soon. However, that it can be how it feels at times. So, but this is still something I've talked to other people who are in a similar situation as I am. And many of them are like, they haven't learned from that universal, slap across the face to wake up. They're still stuck there. And it almost like they've allowed the shame to be something that they allow to define them.
Okay, stop right there. It's one of the most important things that's been said today, guys. We allow shame to define us sometimes. We allow. No one can make you feel shame. And I know that can sound difficult to swallow, but shame is a chosen construct. It is a chosen decision. Shame is actually a decision. And when you realize that, the things we do to ourselves, the things we do to ourselves, that we would let something block us from our light, from our potential, from the beautiful vibrations that this world sends to us. Guys, we adopt it. We adopt it because it reinforces some shitty belief we have about our identity. We adopt it. And we're telling you, throw it out. It does not serve you. It cannot serve you. And you are too important to waste. Thank you for letting me interrupt you. Please continue.
Dug up around this too was there is in the human experience, we are going to make mistakes. We are going to make choices that are going to have consequences that we don't like. And especially in this social media culture that we see everyone's highlight reel, or the opposite of that, which we've also criticized in the past, was the idea of someone seeming to be humble, that false humility of, I feel sad that all my people, I've got to lay them off. And it's like, well, it's hard to discern when someone is being authentic about those mistakes that they've made, because it's not something that many people would consider natural to own mistakes that you've done in our society right now. It's, let's show all the trophies on the wall rather than, yeah, this is something I had to learn the hard way. This is something I had to learn the hard lesson. And so I think that we, especially as I've been growing my business, as I've been, obviously navigating the legal system, is that there are mistakes that are going to happen. And the question is, how long do you let that mistake define you? How long, it's that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional.
Totally. And do you have to let it define you at all? Get in front of it, guys. This does not serve you. Oh, you mean I don't have to let my decisions define me? No. And guess what? Same with your beliefs, your thoughts and your beliefs. We often have thoughts and beliefs that, guess what? They aren't even true. It might not seem like that to you. You might, if I feel it, then it has to be true. Bullshit. Sorry. No. Sometimes we feel like we're horrible people. Sometimes we call ourselves pieces of shit. Our language, our thoughts, it matters. You don't have to believe your thoughts. You don't have to believe your beliefs. And you can change both. You can change your thoughts. You can change your beliefs. And when you do, your actions follow. We are constantly beings in motion seeking alignment. And usually those bad feelings of any kind are the distance between our potential and where we are. It's like a cognitive dissonance. And it's there not as a final judgment. It's there simply as a little ping notification. Ping, I'm a bit out of alignment. Ping, adjust. Ping, oh, okay, not that way. Right? Use your feelings. They're there to guide you. Use those signals. Become heightened. Heighten your awareness of those signals in your life. They may not always sound that loud, but when you get really, really like ninja sharp at identifying them, they actually get louder and louder until, you hear it all the time and you kind of feel like your path it's easier because you can hear those signals clearly. So Michael, what would you recommend to somebody who doesn't feel like their signals are clear? Like clearly you were in a place where you had ignored so many signals. How did you get clear? I think when we were talking, you said you kind of lost faith in your decision making.
Absolutely. I mean, doubt is actually one of the biggest killers of self-esteem. And I very much went into that space of doubt. And it actually took it starts by, and as much as Suzanne hates this, it starts by doing the small pieces. It's about learning to trust smaller decisions. It's about learning, for me, about building that self-trust. Because at least in that moment, whenever I spiraled out, I then outsourced my decision making because I didn't trust it anymore. So it actually took it took time, for sure, of learning to trust myself again and taking some of that back piece by piece, bit by bit.
Yeah, what happened when you outsourced your decision makings and you were suddenly you were reliant on what other people thought because you didn't trust your own thoughts anymore?
It actually, how it felt was, yes, one, it was outsourcing that decision making, but it also felt to me like I was being criticized for every single thing that I did, every single way that I showed up, because I wasn't then fitting their model of who I should be. And I didn't have the self awareness and the trust of myself that maybe they were wrong. I wasn't able to stand up for myself in that case, and I allowed that person to find who I was. And that then, instead of it getting me closer in alignment with who I am, it actually got me further away, to the point that when that particular relationship ended, my daughter was the one who pointed out to me of, this is the dad that I remember, because I became frustrated, angry, irritable, short-tempered, overly serious all the time without the ability to have a laugh and have fun. And that very much is out of alignment with who I am. But it was this slipping away of who I am, and being, I'm not sure if I'd call it passive aggressive, but certainly felt worse and worse about myself the further along that we went. So
And guys, Michael may not like this, but it might be that he finally reached a painful threshold that forced him, when we're under duress, that's often when we make change. That's often when decisions are made. This isn't working. This is hurting. This no longer serves me. And now you see who he is.
So Suzanne, a lot of what we've been talking about up to this point is kind of that shame based on decisions. What about for you? Has shame showed up in your life? How has that redirected you?
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't about decisions. It was more about the things I can't change. Sometimes, sometimes there's something about us that you feel like you're inherently flawed. Maybe, maybe it's a family history. Maybe you feel like it's your destiny. But for me, it came in the form of a rare, potentially fatal blood disease. I had the option very early on to choose an identity of somebody who was sick, somebody who was weak, somebody who had to play it safe, somebody who was inherently flawed, someone who would maybe never be able to live the life that other people did, somebody who had a low life expectancy. So there's something different knowing that you have something about you you cannot change, inherently flawed by birth, and that was a choice I had to make about my identity. And maybe it's my internal redhead, my inner redhead. I feel like I was born of defiance of all of those negative messages. And I'll never forget, I was pretty young when I received my diagnosis, that the doctor who told me, he'd been my primary care doctor for a few years. And then I had this testing for this rare disease. And he was heartbroken when he told me the results. He was crestfallen when he told me the results. And I was young. I was young enough that I was like squarely looking up to him. I was little. And I remember him saying, just the heartbreak in his voice as he said, don't let this ruin your life. You can still live a good life. And I just felt the heaviness of his words coming out. And I got to tell you, they didn't hit me. It's like they fell 6 inches in front of me. And while I didn't know how to articulate it then, the feeling that I get now is, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. And so I thank God I was born with some kind of defiance. Like I said, might be that inner redhead, not sure where that came from, but I had a choice. And I won't say that it doesn't creep in. It's there. I mean, it's definitely there. But because I have been able to check it to a large degree and keep it in its place, I was able to rise above everything that was expected of me. I was, able to rise above my circumstances, create a successful career, go from being afraid to leave my doctors in Cincinnati, Ohio, to living in rural Pakistan, to working in conflict-prone areas, high stress and tension, things that were physically existing in conditions that are physically demanding on my body. Am I perfect? Oh, I could go on for hours with all the things that are not right. But couldn't we all? Isn't that our human condition? That we are always hyper aware of our flaws? We have choices. We have choices. I choose health. I choose longevity. I choose honoring the fact that I am here. And as somebody who's been very, very sick and had their family fly in for their funeral, I can never forget how grateful I am to be here. It's genuine. So shame, shame comes in so many forms, guys, but it only comes in a form that we let in. Doesn't matter if it's our actions, it doesn't matter if it's our body, doesn't matter if it's, my disease that affects every other part of me, that affects my joints, my crooked spine, you name it. I mean, my goodness. Shame only, shame is an infection that we allow. How could it ever serve you? Michael, has shame ever served you?
No, I don't think it has ever served me to help me actualize myself, to move myself forward. It's always been something that's held me back. But as we're kind of coming, I would say, as we're getting ready to wrap up here at the top of the hour, I kind of wanted to talk about, because we talked about kind of the journey down, as I want to kind of talk about more about the journey back up.
Heck yes, because that's been our lifetime work.
Is like at first when we were coming up with the subjects for this year, forgiveness seems like one of those things that comes with this idea of shame. But at least for me, there's a precursor to forgiveness. And that's why we decided on compassion instead. Is that coming from this place of, I could see how that would happen, is for me was necessary to get to that place of forgiveness of myself and of others. is it had to start with this place of compassion. And that to me is one of the biggest levers for unraveling shame. Ownership is one of those other big pieces, is calling out the feedback that we're getting from people can be important, at least on how we're received, but the outcome that you have right now is because of the choices that you've made. Yes, you are here because of those choices. And every single moment, every single morning, every single month, every single year, you have the opportunity to make new and different choices. And you can have those choices be based on the excuses that you make about yourself because of something that is horrible in your past, or it can actually be based on using that as the fuel for where you want to go. But I think that I'm bearing the lead a little bit on this, is kind of where we started with this, is shame is not something that, I know it's not the first place that I go to of, hey, this is the thing that I'm the most ashamed of in every single relationship that I start with. However, we really need to start with the strength to face it and to be willing to bring that out. It's why I like to shine light in the dark corners, is let's knock the dust off of this, bring it out and figure out, is this serving me or not? And if so, I can then disassemble it and let it go. But I've got to be willing to go get it out of that closet, in the back of the closet collecting dust, and say, wow, this has actually slowed me down. This has been an obstacle for me. This has had me not put myself out there. I've allowed this to hold me back.
Yeah, Michael, and critical in that, before that, is of course, yes, having the courage, but also having the self-awareness to, like we said, there are symptoms. Shame leaves clues. Where are we shut down? What is the taboo topic we will never, never go to? What are the things that make us fidget and squirm? When we are doing our inventory for growth, first look for those hot spots, look for those symptoms. And yes, the courage, Michael's talking about the courage it takes to do this work, because it may not be overnight. However, we're speaking so that it doesn't take a lifetime. Michael didn't know he didn't have to believe his thoughts. He didn't know that he doesn't have to believe his beliefs, and that sometimes we have faulty beliefs that we can actually transform. And believe it or not, this work can happen as fast as a decision. It doesn't have to take a lifetime of healing. The lifetime of healing comes from our resistance in letting go something that has embedded itself in our identity. The faster we can, eject that corrosive part from our identity, the faster we can transform into our potential. We don't have to hang on. We are creatures of comfort. We are, Joe Dispenza talks about the nerves that fire together, wired together, and the heap cycle. So we're used to these patterns of beliefs, patterns of thinking. But as soon as you identify this corrosive, cancerous belief and identity that causes shame, expel it. Cast it out. It doesn't serve you.
I think that the thank you for that, is we need to allow that to pass. Yes. And judgment serves us in a moment. It does not serve us for a lifetime. is if we are judging ourselves for something that we did yesterday and we're still holding on to that judgment and considering that an identity flaw, that doesn't serve us, because we have the opportunity to learn and grow in every moment. We have the opportunity to learn from that choice and move forward. But it does start by looking inward. It does start by looking on the consequences on the inside as much as the consequences that are on the outside. But it is this idea of, I've also kind of related to this, and we've danced around it a little bit, and I think it's this idea that thoughts that come up, just like feedback from other people, them sharing their thoughts with you, just because they're stated does not make them truth, does not make them fact. And in many ways, we have the opportunity to put those thoughts, put those judgments on trial and really test the feedback. Does this actually relate to where I'm at? Is this person seeing this from the same lens that I do? Are they aiming for the same results that I am? So it kind of comes back to this idea of shame is something that we allow to happen. We get to choose. We get to choose how we judge ourselves. Our brains are meaning-making machines, but are you actually creating the meaning that's going to help serve you, or are you creating the meaning that's going to hold you back from taking the step to being the best version of yourself in this moment? And that best is always going to be different. You cannot step into a river in the same river at any moment. That river is going to change. You are going to grow. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have good days. And just like the weather, we can't 100% predict it, but we can practice to make progress towards becoming the best version of ourselves.
And you don't need to
doesn't
worry
let you
about
hold that back.
practicing when you realize you are okay.
Mhm.
You are okay.
Mhm.
There's, this is meant for you. And guys, I don't want you to think that we're saying don't let your experiences go without transforming you. Sometimes they are meant for you to craft and build you into who you were meant to be. Michael may not like this, but I don't think he would be anywhere near where he is today in leadership, in growth, in integrity, in wisdom, had he not made some serious mistakes along the way. For me too, it's the same. Those, we say life happens for you, not to you. So in those moments, yes, we're saying definitely reject shame, but do not reject or eject the learning that comes with the journey. And there will be learning on the journey. Transformative, powerful learning that, guess what? In the end, almost always allows you to help others along their way. This is how the field of coaching and mentoring came about. This is about helping others through the journey that you've been. This is the crux of Michael's, growing profession. This is the crux of me as I build my natural health platform so that no one has to fight for their life as long as I have. Again, don't throw away the lessons along the way. It has made you into a powerful human being. All right. So with that, I would love to open this up. Michael, are you okay with that? We would love to know if there's an area of your life that you might need to let go of? Or is there a sensitive spot that makes you squirm? Or any other questions you have, we're totally open and we love to hear from you. Okay. We are so grateful that you joined us. Michael, you have any other thoughts you'd like to share today?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, this is one of those areas that this is just the beginning of our year, in essence,
Woo!
of us talking about a lot of these deeper subjects that it's a place that I've been willing to go, but I do it kicking and screaming. But and in doing so, that's the discipline, right? Is we are going to be talking about next month on March 25th at this same time, going kind of to that next level, is moving from blame to ownership.
Yes.
And that's really kind of our arc for this year, is going from somewhere to somewhere else. Is what actions are we taking in order to get there? So in this case, we're talking about, what do you need to do in order to let go of that shame? And then next really is kind of that blaming others, in my opinion, also doesn't serve us either. So we will be talking about that next month at this same time. And following up with that, we're going to be going to apathy to feeling and instability to committed. So we look forward to having you here with us and providing some feedback with us. We love to have this as a conversation, not just between Suzanne and I, but also with you here as well, because it actually allows us to really see how we can better and best serve a community that really is focused on personal development and growth in their lives. Because we do want this to honestly be able to elevate your mindset to that next tier, that next field, that next space.
We are so grateful to have you here with us today. Thank you for watching. And of course, if you are joining us on YouTube or another platform, please feel free to comment. We'd love to get feedback from you and know how we can better serve you. So have a beautiful month. We'll see you in a few weeks. And I love talking about ownership, guys. So join us in a few weeks. We'll see you soon. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye now. Have a great weekend.